You stood in the produce section last week, and you hesitated. You picked up a peach, and then you put it back. You looked at the cherries and decided you were not sure. You ended up leaving without half the things you went in for, because somewhere along the way, someone told you that fruit was basically sugar, and sugar was the enemy, and you were not sure anymore what was safe to put in your cart. That hesitation is the problem I am solving today. I am going to count down the 10 best fruits for people managing blood sugar, and then walk you through the 5 that demand real caution from least to most important. And number 1 on the best list is the fruit I recommend most consistently in my clinical practice. Stay all the way through, because by the end you will never hesitate in the produce section again. 15 fruits, clear numbers, no more guessing. Let me describe what happens to most people when they are diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, and they ask their doctor about fruit. Some are told fruit is basically sugar, treat it like candy, avoid it. Some are told natural sugar is different from added sugar, fruit is fine, do not worry about it. Some are handed a pamphlet with a list of glycemic index numbers and no explanation of how to use them. And some are told tropical fruits are the problem, stay away from those. 4 different conversations, 4 completely different answers, all from people with professional credentials, all delivered with confidence. No wonder you do not know what to believe. And the practical result of that confusion is not neutral. The people who were told fruit is basically sugar stopped eating it, and they lost access to fiber, vitamins, antioxidants, and specific plant compounds that directly protect the cardiovascular system, the kidneys, and the eyes. These are the very organs most at risk as diabetes progresses. Avoiding fruit entirely is not a conservative, safe choice. It is a choice with real costs that most people were never told about. The people who were told natural sugar is fine started eating freely, with no framework, and then watched their blood sugar readings climb without understanding why. Both groups are stuck, and both groups are stuck because of incomplete information, not because they did not try. You are not imagining the confusion. The advice you received was genuinely contradictory, and that contradiction is not your failure. It is a failure of how the information was communicated. Here is something I want you to hold on to before we go through the list. There is a paradox at the center of the fruit and diabetes conversation that almost nobody explains clearly, and it is the key to everything. Some fruits with very high glycemic index scores, the measure of how fast sugar enters the bloodstream, actually produce low blood sugar impact in realistic portions because of how much water they contain. And some fruits with moderate glycemic index scores produce far more blood sugar disruption in practice than the number suggests, because of how many people eat them in portions that are 5 times the measured amount without realizing it. The number alone does not tell the full story. The full story requires 2 numbers working together. By the end of this video, you will have both for every fruit we discuss, and you will understand how to use them. I am also going to tell you about one fruit that is a genuine paradox, a fruit with a high glycemic index that is actually safe for most people in realistic portions, and a fruit that appears moderate on paper, but consistently causes blood sugar problems in practice. That combination will make complete sense once you understand the mechanism. And understanding the mechanism is what turns a list into actual knowledge you can use for the rest of your life. My name is Dr. Jane Mitchell. I have spent more than 20 years working with patients managing blood sugar from early prediabetes through the longer-term management of type 2 diabetes. In those years, I have reviewed the research on glycemic index, glycemic load, dietary fiber, polyphenols, and the specific compounds in fruits that either protect or stress the cardiovascular and metabolic system. And in 20 years, the single most common piece of nutrition confusion I encounter in patients is fruit. Not carbohydrates broadly, not sugar generally, specifically fruit. Because fruit sits at a genuinely complicated intersection. It contains sugar, it contains fiber, it contains compounds with documented health benefits, and it exists in forms that range from blood sugar safe to blood sugar dangerous depending on ripeness, preparation, and portion size. That complexity deserves a clear explanation, not a list of rules, an explanation. By the end of this video, you will have 2 specific tools, glycemic index and glycemic load, that you can apply to any fruit, any food, any decision at the grocery store or at the table. You will know exactly which 15 fruits we are covering, where each one stands, and why. And you will have a practical starting point you can use tomorrow morning. Before we dive in, if you're finding this useful, take 2 seconds right now, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video, and give this a thumbs up. It genuinely helps more people like you find this content. And drop a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. I'd love to know where our community is tuning in from around the world. Hold on a second. Before we go any further, I've put something together for you. It's called the Glucose Paradox. It's a free guide on blood sugar and diabetes, and you can grab it for free through the link in the description. I'm telling you this now because I want you to finish this video with a concrete tool in your hands. To get it right away, just click the link in the description, head over to my site, and drop your email. You'll receive the guide in your inbox a few minutes later. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get back to the video. Before I explain the 2 tools, I want to tell you about a woman named Sylvia. Sylvia was 67 years old, living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she had been managing type 2 diabetes for 5 years when she came to see me. She was articulate, well-informed, and deeply frustrated. She had followed her original dietary guidance faithfully, cutting out desserts, reducing processed carbohydrates, watching her portions carefully. And she had also, on the advice of a wellness blog she trusted, been drinking a large fruit smoothie every morning as a healthy start to the day. The smoothie contained mango, pineapple, banana, and orange juice. She had been making it for over a year. She was proud of it. She had told herself it was one of the genuinely good things in her routine, the thing that was working for her body in a positive direction. Her fasting blood sugar in the morning was consistently elevated. Her HbA1c had not improved in 2 years, despite otherwise careful management, and she came to me genuinely confused about why she was not making progress. When I explained what that smoothie was doing inside her body every morning, using the 2 tools I am about to give you, Sylvia was quiet for a long moment, and then she said something I want you to remember. I thought I was fighting my diabetes. I had no idea I was feeding it. I thought I was fighting my diabetes. I had no idea I was feeding it. Hold that phrase. We will come back to it. Before the list, you need 2 tools. Without them, the list is just a collection of rules to memorize. With them, you will understand the why behind every item and be able to make informed decisions about any fruit, any time. The first tool is the glycemic index, abbreviated GI. Think of it as a measure of speed, specifically, how fast the sugar from a particular food enters your bloodstream. A GI above 70 means the sugar hits your blood rapidly, like opening a floodgate. Your glucose spikes sharply. Your pancreas releases a large aggressive insulin response to manage it. And then as the insulin overshoots, your blood sugar drops, often below where it started, producing the crash, the fatigue, the craving that arrives an hour after eating. A GI below 55 means the sugar enters slowly, controlled, like water through a filter. Your blood sugar rises gradually, your insulin response is proportionate, and your blood sugar returns to baseline smoothly, without the drop that drives the cycle of cravings and instability. The second tool is glycemic load, abbreviated GL. And this one is the piece that most people have never been given. If GI is speed, GL is total volume. Specifically, how much sugar actually lands in your bloodstream when you eat a realistic portion of that food. A GL below 10 is considered safe. A GL above 20 is a serious red flag. And here is why this second number matters so much. A food can have a moderately high GI, but a very low GL, because a realistic portion contains very little total sugar. Conversely, a food can have a moderate GI but a high GL because the portions most people actually eat are much larger than what was measured. The rule to carry forward: you want both low GI and low GL. One without the other gives you an incomplete picture, and that incomplete picture is exactly how most people end up confused about fruit. For consistency, every fruit I discuss is evaluated at a standard 4-ounce or 120-gram portion. That way we are comparing reality to reality. Number 10 on the best list. Plums. GI of 39, GL of 5. Those are excellent numbers, and yet plums almost never appear in the health content conversation about diabetes-friendly fruit. That invisibility is undeserved. You know that feeling when you want something sweet, but you also know that eating something sweet is going to cost you later. The internal negotiation where you want satisfaction, but you do not want the crash. Plums solve that negotiation cleanly. They are genuinely sweet. They satisfy a craving with real flavor rather than compromise. And at a GL of 5, the blood sugar cost is entirely manageable. Plums also contain compounds that support liver function. Specifically, they help the liver manage glucose storage and release more efficiently. This matters more than most people realize. A liver that is chronically overloaded or inflamed releases too much glucose at the wrong times, contributing to elevated fasting blood sugar that has nothing to do with what you ate. Supporting liver function through food is one of the least discussed but most impactful levers in blood sugar management. That is number 10. Safe, underrated, and genuinely useful. Number 9. Pears. GI of 38, GL of 4. Outstanding numbers. But here is the part of the pear story that most people throw away. Literally. A ripe pear has a large portion of its protective fiber concentrated just beneath the skin. When you peel a pear, you are removing the physical mechanism that slows sugar absorption. The fiber acts as a buffer. It surrounds the sugar as it moves through the digestive tract, controlling the rate at which glucose passes through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. Peel the pear, and you remove that buffer. The sugar from the same piece of fruit now enters your system faster and less controlled than it would have with the skin intact. Think of peeling a pear like removing the filter from a water purification system. The water still flows through, but now it flows through without the mechanism that was making it safe. Eat your pear whole, eat the skin. That is where the protection lives. That is number 9. Simple, accessible, and completely undermined by one small habit most people do not realize they have. Number 8. Apples. GI of 36, GL of 6. You already knew apples were a reasonable choice. What you may not know is the specific mechanism that makes them particularly valuable for people managing diabetes. Apples contain a soluble fiber called pectin. Pectin does something that most dietary fiber does not. It actively forms a gel in the digestive tract that not only slows glucose absorption, but also binds to LDL cholesterol, the form of cholesterol most directly associated with arterial plaque, and carries it out of the body before it can be absorbed. For someone with diabetes, cardiovascular risk is the primary long-term concern. The same disease that disrupts insulin signaling also accelerates arterial damage. An apple with the skin on is simultaneously managing both problems, slowing the glucose response and removing one of the compounds that damages blood vessels over time. One apple, 2 jobs. Eat the skin. You might be thinking, but I have heard that fruit sugar is still sugar, and an apple is no different from candy in terms of blood sugar impact. That is the kind of advice that is technically incomplete in a way that causes real harm. At a GL of 6, an apple does not behave like candy. It behaves like a controlled, fiber-buffered, slow-release source of natural sugar with substantial additional benefits. The comparison ignores fiber, ignores pectin, ignores the difference between a GL of 6 and a GL of 28. That is number 8. Number 7, passion fruit. GI of 27, GL of 5. Those numbers are remarkable, particularly the GI of 27, which is lower than most vegetables. Passion fruit is not a staple in most American kitchens, and I want to make the case for changing that. The nutritional profile is exceptional, high in vitamin C, vitamin A, iron and potassium, with a specific fiber content that produces one of the most controlled glucose responses of any fruit available. But the reason I place passion fruit at number 7 rather than higher on this list comes down to something that is rarely mentioned in the fruit and diabetes conversation: sleep. Passion fruit contains natural compounds, specifically harmon alkaloids, that have a mild sedative effect that supports deep restorative sleep quality. Why does that matter in a video about blood sugar? Because poor sleep directly and measurably worsens insulin resistance. Research has shown that even a few nights of significantly disrupted sleep can reduce insulin sensitivity by as much as 30% the following morning. Your body's ability to manage glucose is dramatically impaired by inadequate sleep, and no dietary change fully compensates for it. A fruit that simultaneously provides excellent blood sugar numbers and actively supports sleep quality is doing double duty in a way most people have never considered. Eat it in the evening. Let it work while you sleep. That is number 7. Number 6. Whole oranges. GI of 40, GL of 5. Perfectly safe, genuinely nutritious, and the center of one of the most consequential misunderstandings in everyday diabetes management. Because the fruit at number 6 and orange juice are not the same food. They are not interchangeable. They do not behave the same way inside your body. And understanding why is the single most impactful piece of fruit knowledge I can give you. Think about what juicing actually does. You take 2 or 3 oranges, you extract the liquid, and the fiber, the physical material that was slowing sugar absorption, stays behind in the pulp that you throw away or compost. What you drink is the water content, the vitamins and the sugar, in concentrated liquid form, with 0 fiber to control the rate of absorption. Without fiber, that sugar enters your bloodstream at nearly the speed of a glucose solution. The GL of a standard glass of orange juice reaches above 20, the red zone. The same oranges eaten whole have a GL of 5. Same fruit, same sugar, radically different metabolic outcome, because the fiber is present in one form and absent in the other. And here is the compounding problem. Would you sit down and eat 3 whole oranges in one sitting? Almost certainly not. You would eat 1, feel satisfied from the fiber and volume, and stop. But in juice form, those 3 oranges disappear in under a minute. You barely register the consumption. The protective satiety mechanism that fiber provides never activates. The portion that felt effortless to consume whole becomes automatic and invisible as juice. Freshly squeezed, homemade, organic, no added sugar. It does not matter. The protection was in the fiber, and you removed the fiber. Eat your orange. Do not drink it. Full stop. That is number 6. I want to pause here at the midpoint and bring back the paradox I mentioned at the very beginning. I told you there was a fruit with a very high glycemic index that is actually safe for most people in realistic portions, and a fruit that looks moderate on paper but consistently causes blood sugar problems in practice. Both of those fruits are coming, and now that you understand glycemic load, the total volume of sugar in a realistic serving, both of those cases will make complete sense. But before I get to the top 5 on the best list, I want to tell you about a man named Terence. Terence was 71 years old, living outside of Baltimore, Maryland, and he had been a type 2 diabetic for 7 years. He was careful, methodical, and frustrated in a specific way that I recognize immediately. He had done the work. He had educated himself. He could recite glycemic index numbers for common foods with reasonable accuracy. He had a system, but his system had one critical flaw. He was evaluating fruits by GI alone, without GL. He had been told that grapes were moderate, around a GI of 60, and he had interpreted that as a manageable choice. He bought a bunch every week, ate them as his snack, and reached into the bowl repeatedly while he read or watched television, barely tracking how many he had consumed. At the end of most evenings, the bowl was empty. He had eaten 30 or 40 grapes without any conscious awareness of the total. The GL of 30 grapes is not moderate. It is very high, and his blood sugar readings after those evenings consistently told the story his GI-only framework could not explain. When I introduced the concept of glycemic load and showed Terence the difference between how fast sugar enters the bloodstream and how much total sugar his body had to process, the picture became instantly clear. He had the speed number. He had been missing the volume number, and the volume was the problem the entire time. We will come back to Terence when we reach the caution list. NAS. Number 5. Kiwi. GI of 38, GL of 9, excellent numbers, and a fruit that earns its place here for 2 separate reasons. The first is the obvious one. At a GL of 9, kiwi sits comfortably within safe territory for blood sugar management. The fiber content is high relative to the sugar content, and the vitamin C and E combination is among the densest available in common fruits. The second reason is specific to diabetes. Approximately 2/3 of people with type 2 diabetes also develop hypertension, high blood pressure, either as a complication or as a concurrent condition. The two are driven by overlapping mechanisms, particularly chronic inflammation and arterial stiffening. Kiwi has been studied specifically for its effects on blood pressure, with clinical research showing meaningful reductions in systolic blood pressure in people who consumed kiwi regularly over a period of weeks. Managing both diabetes and hypertension through food choices simultaneously is not a minor convenience. It is the difference between needing one medication and needing two, between monitoring one set of numbers and monitoring two, between simple and complicated. Kiwi does not make either condition disappear, but it actively works on both fronts at once, which is the kind of efficiency that matters enormously in long-term disease management. That is number 5. Drink number 2, fresh radish and parsley. Blended. You know the reading that does not make sense. You went to sleep with a reasonable evening number. You ate nothing overnight, and you woke up with a fasting reading higher than when you went to bed. It happens enough that you have started to think of it as just how your body is now. The dawn phenomenon, the morning cortisol, some explanation that makes it sound inevitable. But for a significant number of people experiencing exactly this pattern, the liver is the piece of the puzzle that has not been addressed. Most people think of blood sugar as a diet problem. Eat less sugar, blood sugar improves. That model is incomplete in an important way. Your liver is one of the primary regulators of blood glucose in your body, not just a passive processor of what you eat, but an active manager of glucose balance throughout the day and night. Your liver stores glucose in the form of glycogen and releases it back into the bloodstream when your body needs fuel. When that system is working well, it is beautifully balanced. When the liver is stressed, overloaded, or dealing with accumulated fat, a condition called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that affects far more people than realize it, it loses that balance. It releases too much glucose at the wrong times. It becomes less responsive to the signals that are supposed to tell it when to hold and when to release. The result is blood sugar that rises during the night without any dietary explanation. Morning readings that are consistently higher than expected. A system that seems to be generating glucose on its own schedule, regardless of what you eat. Think of a clogged fuel injector in a car engine. The car still runs, but it is not delivering fuel efficiently or cleanly. Sometimes it floods the engine, sometimes it starves it. The driving experience is inconsistent and frustrating. And the problem is not in what fuel you are putting in. It is in the delivery mechanism itself. That clogged delivery mechanism, the liver that is not processing and releasing glucose cleanly, is what radish and parsley work on. Radishes are cruciferous vegetables, and cruciferous vegetables have well-documented effects on liver detoxification pathways. Research on cruciferous vegetable consumption has shown measurable improvements in liver enzyme levels, reductions in liver fat, and improvements in the liver's metabolic function over time. Parsley contributes through its natural anti-inflammatory compounds, its support of liver cell function, and its role in reducing oxidative stress in liver tissue. Together, blended fresh with water, they provide targeted support to the organ that is most often overlooked in blood sugar management, but that, when it is functioning poorly, can undermine everything else you are doing. Preparation. Blend fresh radish and fresh parsley with water to a drinkable consistency. Consume regularly. The same rule applies as with the green bean drink. Do not add sweeteners, and the same patience is required. Liver function does not change in 3 days. It changes over weeks of consistent, gentle support. Think of it as maintenance rather than medicine, the way you service a car regularly rather than waiting for a breakdown. Now you might be thinking, I have tried liver detox products before. What makes this different? The difference is that this is not a supplement engineered to produce a dramatic short-term effect. It is a consistent dietary input of the specific phytonutrients that liver cells actually use to do their own repair work. Your liver is one of the most regenerative organs in the body. It is designed to recover, given the right conditions. This drink helps create those conditions, one day at a time. That is number 2. The drink that addresses the organ most people forget about when they think about blood sugar, and that, when supported properly, can change the pattern of those unexplained morning readings. I want to pause here at the midpoint of our countdown and bring back the question I asked you to hold. I told you there was a finding in the long-term research that showed the same fruit consumed whole versus juiced produces dramatically different health outcomes over years. Now you understand why. The fiber is the mechanism. It is the physical substance that controls the rate of glucose absorption. Without it, the sugar from fruit arrives too fast for the body to manage efficiently. With it, the same sugar arrives slowly, steadily, in a form the system can handle. But here is the question I want you to sit with before we reach number 1. If fiber is the key variable, if the presence of fiber is what makes the difference between a blood sugar spike and a controlled, gradual absorption, then what would happen if you consumed a drink that was specifically built around healthy fat and fiber simultaneously? Fat slows gastric emptying, the rate at which your stomach moves its contents into the small intestine. Fiber controls the absorption rate once it gets there. Two separate mechanisms, both pointing in the same direction, both working in the same morning window. That is exactly what number 1 does. And it is the reason that in my clinical experience, it produces the most immediate and consistent felt difference of the 3. Before I tell you about drink number 1, I want to tell you about a man named Gerald. Gerald was 70 years old, living outside of Portland, Oregon, and he had been a type 2 diabetic for 8 years. He was one of those patients who arrived already knowing a great deal. He had read widely, he had tried multiple approaches, and he had developed a healthy skepticism about health claims because he had been disappointed enough times that promises no longer moved him. When I described the 3 drinks to Gerald, his response was characteristic. The green bean drink, reasonable. He could see the mechanism. The radish and parsley drink, interesting. He was willing to try it. The avocado smoothie, immediate resistance. He had been told, repeatedly, that fat was dangerous for people with his cardiovascular history. He had been on a low-fat diet for years, specifically because he believed fat was the enemy. The idea of starting his morning with avocado felt to him like being told the solution was to do the exact thing he had been most carefully avoiding. I spent time explaining the research to Gerald, not quickly, because he deserved a real explanation, not a reassurance. And when the mechanism was clear, when he understood that the fear of dietary fat in healthy whole food forms was based on research that has been substantially revised over the past 2 decades, when he understood that healthy fat was not the enemy, but one of the most reliable tools for blood sugar stabilization available to him, he agreed to try it for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, he came back with his blood glucose log and a look on his face that I recognized immediately. The readings were down. His mid-morning energy, which he had described as usually poor, had been, in his word, reliable for the first time in years. His wife had mentioned that he seemed less irritable in the afternoons, and Gerald himself said, "I spent 8 years afraid of the wrong thing. I spent 8 years afraid of the wrong thing." That is the phrase I want you to carry into number 1. And here it is, number 1, the avocado smoothie. That energy drop, the one that happens around 10 in the morning, the one I described at the very start of this video. That specific sequence of feeling okay and then suddenly not. That drop is reactive hypoglycemia. Blood sugar rising fast, insulin correcting it aggressively, blood sugar falling. The crash is real, the mechanism is real, and it is almost always triggered by the first drink of the morning. What if the first drink of the morning did the opposite? What if instead of triggering a fast glucose surge, it slowed everything down, extended the rate at which any subsequent glucose entered the bloodstream, kept the insulin response proportionate, and created a biochemical environment in which your energy had nowhere to crash to? That is what healthy fat does. And avocado is the most accessible, most nutrient-dense, most versatile source of healthy fat available to most people reading this. Think of your digestive system on an avocado morning, like a river with a dam installed downstream. Glucose from breakfast is still entering the system. The dam does not stop it, but the dam controls the flow rate. Instead of the river surging all at once and flooding the downstream territory, the water passes through at a pace the system can manage. Blood sugar rises gradually. Insulin responds proportionately, and instead of the sharp drop that follows an insulin overcorrection, blood sugar returns to baseline gently. Over time, without the cliff edge that produces the mid-morning crash. The specific mechanism is called delayed gastric emptying. Fat slows the rate at which the stomach releases its contents into the small intestine. When that rate slows, everything downstream slows: the breakdown of carbohydrates, the absorption of glucose, the insulin response. The timeline of the morning extends. Instead of a 1-hour window of decent energy followed by a crash, you get 3 to 4 hours of stable, usable, predictable energy. Avocado also contains approximately 10 grams of fiber per fruit, meaningful viscous fiber that, as we discussed with juice, is exactly what controls how quickly glucose moves from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. So you are getting the fat-based gastric slowing effect and the fiber-based absorption control effect simultaneously from the same food in the same morning drink. And avocado contains potassium and magnesium in meaningful amounts. Potassium supports healthy blood pressure and proper insulin function. Magnesium, which we covered in depth in another video, is a cofactor in the cellular signaling pathway through which insulin does its job. Most people over 60 are deficient in both. A morning avocado smoothie addresses that deficiency in a form that is absorbed alongside fat, which improves the absorption of fat-soluble nutrients. The monounsaturated fat in avocado, specifically a compound called oleic acid, has been studied directly for its effects on metabolic health. Multiple clinical studies have shown that regular consumption of oleic acid reduces markers of inflammation in the body, improves the sensitivity of insulin receptors at the cellular level, and supports the kind of blood sugar stability that shows up not just in how you feel, but in fasting glucose readings, in HbA1c trends, in the long-term markers that matter most. Now you might be thinking, won't all that fat make me gain weight? This is the fear that Gerald carried for 8 years, and it is worth addressing directly. The relationship between dietary fat and body weight is far more complex than the low-fat advice of the 1980s and 1990s suggested. What the research on healthy whole food fats consistently shows is this: fat increases satiety. It triggers the release of hormones that communicate to your brain that fuel has arrived and the search for more can stand down. People who add healthy fat to their breakfast consistently report reduced mid-morning cravings, reduced total calorie intake through the day, and improved satisfaction after meals. Avocado does not make you reach for more food. It reduces the urgency that drives you toward food in the first place. Simple recipe: 1/2 to 1 whole avocado, blended with 1 cup of water or unsweetened almond milk. You can add a small handful of leafy greens for fiber without meaningfully affecting the taste. A pinch of Ceylon cinnamon, which has its own documented blood sugar benefits through insulin receptor support. Blend until smooth. Drink it in the morning, ideally before or with breakfast rather than separately. The most common mistake: adding fruit, honey, or sweetened milk to make it taste better. All of these additions introduce fast-digesting glucose and partially cancel the stabilizing effect you are creating. If the flavor needs adjustment, a small squeeze of lemon or a very small amount of plain Greek yogurt blended in adds protein and tartness without spiking blood sugar. Keep it simple. Keep it unsweetened. Let the fat do its work. That is number 1. Now let us talk about what actually happens when you put these changes into practice. Because I think the realistic timeline deserves honest discussion rather than either inflated promises or discouraging understatement. In the first 3 to 5 days of replacing morning juice with any of these 3 drinks, most people notice something specific. The mid-morning crash either does not come or arrives later and less severely. This is not imagination. It is the direct effect of removing the rapid glucose surge that was triggering the crash in the first place. Your blood sugar does not spike as high. Insulin does not overcorrect as aggressively. Blood sugar does not drop as sharply. The cliff edge simply is not there. Within the first week, most people also notice that the pull toward mid-morning snacking is less urgent, not absent, but less insistent, less like a demand and more like a suggestion. That change, small as it sounds, is one of the clearest signals that the underlying blood sugar pattern has shifted. The craving was never about willpower. It was about blood sugar dropping to a level that triggers a genuine hunger signal. When blood sugar does not drop that far, the signal does not arrive with that urgency. Over 2 to 4 weeks of consistency, the longer-term effects begin to compound. Morning fasting readings may begin to trend lower, particularly in people who are addressing the liver support component with drink number 2. Energy through the day becomes more predictable. Not just the morning, but the afternoon pattern, the pre-dinner window, the evening stability that determines how well you sleep. The body's overall glucose regulation begins to smooth out as the chronic cycle of spike-crash-spike is interrupted day after day. Over 2 to 3 months, some people see meaningful changes in their lab markers, fasting glucose trending down, HbA1c improving. These are the structural changes that reflect a body whose blood sugar management system has had consistent, sustained support, rather than consistent, sustained disruption. None of this requires perfection. It requires consistency, the kind that is achievable, precisely because these are simple, accessible, repeated most mornings. The consistency is what makes the biology respond. I want to address something that comes up every time I discuss blood sugar management, because I know it is on many of your minds. Sleep, movement, stress. Yes, they matter. Poor sleep reduces insulin sensitivity measurably. Even a few nights of significantly disrupted sleep can shift your body's glucose response in a direction that dietary changes alone cannot fully offset. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, and elevated cortisol raises blood sugar directly through a mechanism that operates independently of what you eat. A 10 to 15-minute walk after meals is one of the most consistently supported blood sugar interventions in the research, muscles absorbing glucose directly, bypassing the compromised insulin signaling pathway. I am not ignoring any of that, but I am focused on drinks today for a specific reason. What you consume in the first 30 minutes of your morning sets a metabolic tone that influences every biological event that follows. The blood sugar pattern that starts at 7 o'clock with a glass of juice is still reverberating through your system at noon. The pattern that starts at 7 o'clock with an avocado smoothie is a different pattern from the first moment. Changing the morning drink is not the whole picture, but it is the highest return single intervention available in the daily routine of most people, and it is the most immediate one to feel. Start there. Let your body show you what is possible. Then add the walk. Then add the sleep improvements. Build the complete picture one piece at a time, starting with the piece that produces the fastest and most tangible personal feedback. Before we close, I want to come back to Norma, the woman from Savannah, who had been faithfully making her glass of fresh orange juice every morning for years, believing she was protecting herself, and discovering that the very habit she was proudest of was the one that most needed to change. Norma switched to an avocado smoothie for 3 weeks. She added the radish and parsley drink on 3 mornings per week. She kept everything else exactly the same. 3 weeks later, she sent me a note with her blood glucose log attached, and one line that I want you to carry with you from this video. She wrote, "The mornings are mine again. That is what blood sugar stability actually feels like from the inside. Not a dramatic transformation, not a medical miracle, just the mornings being yours again. Energy that behaves, a body that responds to what you do with it, focus that does not evaporate by 10. A day that starts on your terms, rather than on the terms of a crash you have been managing around for years. You came into this video with a glass of juice you believed was good for you, and a morning pattern that was quietly working against you. Now you understand why. Now you have 3 specific alternatives, each working through a different mechanism, each accessible, each practical, each requiring nothing more than 10 minutes of preparation and the willingness to make one consistent change. The mornings can be yours again, starting tomorrow morning with one different drink. That is the whole challenge. That is the whole beginning. And hey, if you made it all the way here, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button to let me know this was worth your time, and leave a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. Seriously, I read every single one, and it means a lot to see how far this community reaches. You know what the problem is with diabetes and high blood sugar. Most people find out way too late, and by the time they do, they have no idea where to even start. That's why I decided to create a free guide. It's called the Glucose Paradox, and inside you'll find everything you wish you'd known sooner. I'll explain how blood sugar actually works, and why your body sometimes reacts the exact opposite way you'd expect. That's why it's called a paradox. I've also included concrete habits you can start changing right now, even if you know zero about nutrition or medicine. It's free. You can download it in a second, and it might be the single most useful thing you do for your health today. Just click the link in the description to head to the site, drop your email, and get the guide sent straight to you. Don't put this off.